Hello and welcome to the Wednesday Total Soccer Show. I am Daryl Grove and I'm joined by a man who, much like your Bruce Arena team, always gets the point. It's Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I think I'll take that introduction. I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel about it. As I'm still not sure how I feel about that 1-1 draw last night.
Oh, yeah. So the USA drew 1-1 away to Panama in World Cup qualifying. Goal from Dempsey, equaliser from Gomez pretty soon after, finished 1-1. We did our instant review.
We did.
And we were really up and down, right? We still can't figure out how to feel about it. We've watched it again this morning, and we've got more detail, more data. Still can't figure out how to feel about it, except I think I may have convinced you that getting out of Panama City with a point in World Cup qualifying is ultimately a decent thing to have done.
Yes, but I think the difference is that you've convinced me from the perspective of, it wasn't actually that good of a U.S. performance, and maybe Panama should have won.
So count your blessings.
So instead, because I know their expected goals was much higher than the United States. So in that regard, then, if you think about it through the lens of maybe Panama should have gotten all 3 points, then to get 1 point is a decent result.
Okay.
It's not more like it was a heroic performance from the U.S. where they sat back, they did what they needed to do because that 1 point was their goal. It seems like they were a little bit lucky. Then maybe in the final 20 minutes or so, they were like, we'll pretend like this was the plan all along.
Do these two things sort of overlap though? Once you have a not great performance, doesn't it then become actually kind of heroic to somehow turn that into a point? Instead of, for example, a 4-0 defeat to Costa Rica, which, if you remember, is where we were not so long ago.
Very true.
The last time we went away in CONCACAF, we got a 4-0 defeat. And John Brooks had lost his mind.
Yes, I know. And I know, obviously it's very difficult to go on the road in CONCACAF. I think Matt Doyle did a good job of pointing out, I think that, under Jurgen Klinsmann, it was like a 1-4-1 record.
Yeah. The one win was against Panama, actually. It was the Zuzi,
exactly.
Zuzi goal.
Yeah. So I think in that regard, yes, it's always going to be difficult. It's just that it was such an anemic performance from the United States, particularly in that second half.
It's a new descriptor for you.
I mean, if the shoe fits, then you're lazy. and I mean, that's what it felt like, at least in the second half.
You think lazy? I don't think we're ever a show that throws that word around, so I'm interested in why you would say that.
Sure. Okay. Maybe lazy's too harsh, but
It was 85 degrees, right?
Yeah, and it will get hotter in Central America, and there are games to be played in, say, June, where it's going to be even more difficult. Away to Trinidad and then away to Mexico? Is that right? Yeah, so going to be difficult conditions there as well. It just felt like it was the United States, at least in the second half, again, I say, sort of a lot of standing. It was a lot of waiting for the ball to come. It was a lot of center backs on the ball, Michael Bradley dropping deep, nobody really making that many runs, to the extent that even Christian Pulisic, who I think was one of the bright spots in this game, there were a couple of different times where we were both sort of like, why isn't he moving? Why doesn't he check too? Why doesn't he make that run down the line? And I don't know if that was a game plan. I don't know if that was just something that, why make that run when I'm not going to get the ball? Or if it was just overall everybody was sort of content with the way things were.
And this is still a thing I go back and forth, and I still feel like, it's the second game in a few days, right? Friday, Tuesday. It was hot. I know it's going to get hotter, but it was hot and humid, which is, kind of tough. There's the fireworks. You've been up all night. You've been kicked around by Panama all game. And I can see why towards the end there would be some players walking. But at the same time, I'm with you. When I see it on the screen, I'm like, run, make a move.
I mean, except that it wasn't at the end of the game. It was in the first 45 and it was in the first 15 of the second half that it was a lot of static. Two players up top, them being Clem Dempsey and Josie Altidore, sometimes moving. Don't get me wrong. It's not like they were just statues. But more often than not, I think we were both confused as to why there wasn't more off-the-ball movement. And I think the comparison I had was in the Honduras game. Michael Bradley did drop between the center backs once in the first 3 minutes, but then they got that goal, and then from then on, he was far more forward, doing a good job between the lines. In this game, within 1 minute, he drops, or 2 minutes, he drops between the center backs, and he's pretty much there for the rest of the game.
Yeah, but again, okay, so to play counter to that, part of that is I think Bradley drops deep to try and get something going, and then once he feels like he's got momentum going, then he steps out, and the whole team progresses forward. You know what I mean? So he may just be still stuck at square one, trying to get things started. Yeah, it's like it's a rotary engine, and he's like pulling on it, trying to get it started. But the lawnmower is going.
But the key distinction there, though, is that you're saying, and then he gets things going to get things going. If things don't get going, then why keep doing it?
Yes,
and
true.
That's the
Maybe
point. Is
this
that
should have been a different approach.
Yeah, because that assertion you just made is dependent upon. Because remember that one time he dropped back, and then Jones showed, and then they played it this way, and then it was this way, and then they were away, and that kept working. It was more like, remember when he dropped back and got the ball? And then kind of stood on it for a while, and then he played it back to Tim Ream, and then he moved forward a little bit. It just felt like it was the same type of play over and over and over again that wasn't really developing or leading to any sort of progressive soccer.
Okay, so before we get into sort of the tactical breakdown of what happened in this game, I think we want to get to the theme of today's show, which we agreed via text message this morning, is that things can be two things.
Yes.
In that, for example, we've already said this, it can be a poor performance, but also a good point.
Yeah.
Right? Things can be two things. It's not either the US is the greatest team in the world or the US is terrible and all the players should be fired and Bruce Arena should be fired.
Yeah.
And we should just get like a whole new cast in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's an in-between zone and it's fourth place in CONCACAF.
Yeah. It's that combined with, like, it doesn't have to be an extreme take. You don't have to have, like, Bradley had a bad game and therefore he should be dropped. Or Bradley had a great game and therefore he should never be dropped. There can be in between where it sort of is like, he didn't play that well, but I think right now he is the guy that's going to go forward. I know that might annoy some people, but I think that's where we are. Yeah. I think if you look at Bruce Arena and the way he handles questions about Bradley, there's never any indication that, like, we're looking at other options there. Like, I think that's his guy, that's his captain.
They're not.
Yeah. I mean,
if you're sort of determined to die on the hill of Michael Bradley should be dropped from the national team, you're going to die on that hill and the rest of the army's going to keep marching.
Maybe. But I think it also goes the other way, where I've seen some people on Twitter and some people who read about soccer professionally saying, like, you're crazy if you think that this wasn't a good result, that this wasn't a good point. Like, they just blew out Honduras. Like, let's all completely forget about that game and instead focus on this game. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what happens. Like, this is the most recent game. Yeah. I'm going to focus on some things that didn't go right, so that later on they don't go wrong again.
Yeah, okay, I can see that, because you can make the argument that 4 points from 6, with one of those points coming away, is good, but also that doesn't mean we have to celebrate this because it was a poor performance and there were many things wrong with the performance. Again, things can be two things.
They can be, yeah.
Hashtag? Does that need a hashtag?
Sure. I think it's paraphrasing Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so maybe we should just credit Jake Peralta there.
What did Jake Peralta say?
I think he said stuff can be two things.
Oh, that's just totally different.
Yeah.
This phrase can be two things.
Yeah.
By changing one word.
Yep.
Well, should we do this? Before we get to the tactical, I want to say tactical battle, but it really wasn't one. We called it, like a game that came from the 80s?
Yep.
Arrived in a DeLorean?
Yep.
Should we talk about the goals?
Sure.
So, I mean, these will be the most memorable things that people will have seen in this game last night. We didn't really break them down on the instant review show because we only saw them maybe once or twice.
Right.
Let's think about how the US first goal came about. The goal that had us cheering here in the office late at night.
I mean, it comes about because it is still some of that US slow possession out of the back.
Yes.
The difference is
which was a problem for a while, right? But this is where it went right. This is the case you made to me.
This is where I think it went right for the U.S. More specifically, it's when Panama did something wrong. And it was one of the few times where routinely it was both teams in a 4-4-2, and at least with Panama, and with the U.S. as well, but in this case, Panama, it was very often that they were not trying to press. They were not trying to step forward. They weren't really putting any pressure on Ream or Omar Gonzalez. And then when Tim Howard would occasionally bring the ball all the way up, again, no pressure, because it was more important to keep those kind of very steady lines and to not allow any play through those lines. In this one situation, those forwards are a little bit further up, and then midfield, as a result, they're a little bit stretched and they're a little bit jagged. It's not one flat line that we saw routinely. It's kind of intermittent spacing.
The Panama midfield.
Yeah, and because they're pressed forward, that does leave gaps in behind, and it leaves gaps between the midfield and the defense, and that's what Jermaine Jones, specifically, is able to point out or pick out.
Yeah, can we talk about Jermaine Jones for a second then?
Sure.
His position, his role was kind of hard to pin down, but it did seem like he was either tasked with going and sort of maybe being like a number 10, like going and just going behind Altidore and Dempsey, or if Graham Zusi went forward, coming across to the right and being like an extra right-sided defensive midfielder kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it seemed like in this possession, he'd gone for that right-side midfielder type thing, came and collected the ball off of, I believe, Omar Gonzalez.
And then the other key distinction here is, like, in the, I think, second minute we spotted that the U.S. were trying to build out of the back again, and when the center backs get the ball in turn, they're the only two American players in frame aside from Tim Howard because the fullbacks are so far forward. In this
too far, right?
Yeah,
too far forward.
And
I would say they weren't there to receive passes. They were only there like looking for long balls in the channels to chase down.
Yeah, and in this situation, because Graham Zusi is dropped back, he is able to like basically be that outlet, and so he pulls a defender with him. Before the defender could just stand between that ball from Gonzalez and Graham Zusi, and he's marked off. Now that defender has to come up a little bit, which again pulls that whole midfield forward. That's why that left midfielder is sucked in. That's why the center mids now have to come over and help cover a little bit as well. And that's why there's room for Christian Pulisic to run in behind.
There is, right? Zusi, weirdly, Zusi not pushing forward, open space for Pulisic to run into. I don't think we did that enough like after we used it to get this goal.
Yeah, I agree completely.
But Jones sees it. Jermaine Jones has time because he's like defensive midfielders have been pulled away from him. Bit of space has been opened up. Pulisic is making what I think is like a curved diagonal run. Couldn't tell because the camera angle was very tight. It was hard to see the whole field. Jones plays it bending down the line, bending inwards into the feet of Christian Pulisic or into the feet of Beloy.
Neither, I think. I mean, he basically plays it over the top and long. Beloy tries to do, I think basically because he had been beating up, he and the rest of Panama had been beating up on Christian Pulisic for most of that first half. I think he thought, I can knock him off the ball. I can body him a little bit. He's small. He's like 140 pounds or whatever. I am probably double that. So I can bump him.
But he's not 280 pounds.
He's a big dude. And so I bet he thought I can body him and just continue on. So he tries to do almost like a Cruyff turn and bring it back the other way. And I think maybe loses.
It was a clumsy Cruyff turn.
It was. I think it was also a clumsy field because we did see at times there was water shooting up from the field, which I think maybe also made it hard for him to keep his footing.
Yep.
Pulisic does a really good job of stepping across, bodying him off the ball, possessing the ball, and then being able to find Clint Dempsey, who I'm assuming was screaming very loud for the ball.
And I'm imagining Beloy in his head, he's like, I had no idea he was that strong.
Yeah.
Because then he tries to get him in a headlock, he's trying to wrestle him, and Pulisic wiggles away from him. And then doesn't Torres come across?
Yep.
I've just realised Torres comes across to try and make up for Beloy's mistake, gets cut, right? Doesn't Pulisic do a quick cut backwards? But Torres did have Dempsey. So then, because he's come across, that's part of the reason there's that passing lane is open for Dempsey.
Well, it's also because Beloy doesn't go back. Because Beloy, once he's beaten by Pulisic, kind of watches Pulisic dribble and then have his contest.
He's front row seats.
Yeah, he has and then he watches him have his contest with Torres, where if he had been more mindful, he would have spotted that Clint Dempsey is now wide open. And it really was only 5 yards to close. Because he's ball watching and maybe a little bit pride hurt. He's not so focused on doing his defensive job.
Yeah.
That's why Clint Dempsey's there.
Oh, credit to Christian Pulisic, obviously. I mean, I know that it's very fashionable to celebrate Christian Pulisic, and I would say again in this game, didn't do everything right.
Nope.
But this was the one magic moment.
Yeah, and I think two things about two players here. One, I think Bruce Arena after the game praised Christian Pulisic not just for having a solid performance and getting the assist, but also for kind of adapting his game and evolving based on the fact that
adapting was the phrase he used, right?
I think so, yeah, because he wasn't getting any preferential treatment or even any treatment from the referee. The referee was letting a lot of stuff go on Pulisic. He got a good 4 or 5 knocks in that first half.
Yeah, he was getting preferential treatment from the back of Panamanian hands.
Yeah, and even I think Grant Wall in his recap pointed out that within the first 15 seconds, the U.S. win a throw-in and Pulisic goes to take it and the ball boy won't give him the ball. We saw them do that a couple times in this game.
Yeah.
And even that, it sort of set the tone there of nope, we're not going to be nice to you at all.
That's why this morning's episode of Goalmouth, the other podcast that we do, George Qureshi, did a really good episode this morning. It was titled, Welcome to CONCACAF Christian Pulisic.
Yeah.
Exclamation mark.
And so I think with that in mind, he did well. But the second player I want to focus on is Jermaine Jones.
Okay.
Who I think after he played this ball, maybe was just all right, I've done my job. I've done my good thing.
You think he packed up for the night?
I think he did something. I can't really tell you what, but I know he did something.
Would you want to get into the Jones performance now?
Sure.
Because I also want to talk about Panama's goal. Okay, we'll analyse Panama's goal later. I kind of think Jermaine Jones was asked to do a lot. Because he was asked to do the Pulisic number 10 stuff, but also the sort of on-the-side defensive midfield stuff. Because Pulisic was, right mid, essentially, in the 4-4-2, but also it seemed had license to drift infield and be that number 10. So it's almost like you imagine Jones and Pulisic kind of switching spaces in a way.
At times, yeah. I would say, though, that that's not that much. That if you compare that to any team that does play high pressure or the background that Christian Pulisic is coming from, he gets tasked with doing a lot of different things in a very specific way.
Yeah.
I think that's not Jermaine Jones' game. I think that he functions much better when he has the freedom to roam and kind of do what he wants and be a destroyer, but also get forward.
Yeah.
And when you're asking him to do, hey, you are one of 2 central midfielders, so you need to be here when this happens and you need to drop here when this happens, I don't think that's the strongest part of his game.
You think he's more he just wants to follow his instincts, and once you sort of once you put conditions on and parameters on where he should be, it blunts him a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. Or confuses him, or makes it so that he's not playing at 100%, because if you've got 10% focused on, oh wait, I need to be doing this, I need to be thinking about this, then you're not focused on other things or have the freedom or natural ability that you would otherwise.
And I've just remembered there are a lot of moments that you pointed these out to me that you felt like Jermaine Jones of old or of recent would have won that ball, not just stumbled over it and conceded a throw-in kind of thing. A lot of I don't want to say 50, I do say 50-50 balls that normally he would just clean the other guy out and come away with the ball. It seems like maybe he didn't quite have that extra thrust that is what makes Jermaine Jones, right?
Or just the ability to do and this sounds way too harsh, but it's the best way I can explain it, is to do multitasking, to do multiple things at once. So the one you're referencing in particular, it's the ball play is overhit. He does a good job to run onto it. He does a good job to step across the defender so that he is in pole position to win the ball.
Are we thinking in the top left attacking corner?
Yes, exactly, in the second half, But because he's done that, again, this is where I say it feels like he was focused on other things that he's not usually focused on, his first touch goes off of his shin. And then he has to try to make up for it, and then he's in a weird position. He gets bodied off the ball. I think in years past, Jermaine Jones either settles that perfectly or certainly doesn't get knocked off the ball and then kind of lay there complaining to the referee.
Yeah.
And so he just felt here like either he was being asked to do something that he wasn't particularly comfortable with, or we have maybe potentially started to see Jermaine Jones on that kind of downward slide, but where maybe he isn't an automatic starter anymore.
Didn't you say that when Acosta came on, you thought maybe it was the beginning of the end of Jermaine Jones?
I mean, yes, and that was maybe too harsh at the time, which is why I said it off air, you jerk. But it felt a little bit more like, at least in terms of if we're going to go with a 4-4-2 and we're going to have two center midfielders, I don't think it can be Bradley and Jones.
Why not?
Because I don't think that they complement each other, and for what I just said, I think if you're going to do it with a 4-2-3-1 or a midfield diamond where everyone is kind of compact and everybody else knows their roles, so Jermaine Jones can kind of roam and do the Jermaine Jones thing, then maybe it still works. But if it's just the two of them and they're both having very specific instructions, the two of them being Jones and Bradley, I don't know if that suits his skill set, and I certainly don't think it helps Michael Bradley do the things that Michael Bradley's trying to do.
And this gets into the theme of the show.
Yep.
Hashtag things can be two things, right? This doesn't mean that suddenly Jermaine Jones is useless and we should jettison Jermaine Jones.
Right.
No Triple J. What I agree with you that it means that maybe Jones and Bradley as a central midfield partnership in anything resembling a 4-4-2 is not going to work.
Right.
But I still think that means Jermaine Jones can function. For example, if we play a diamond, think of the Leggett role, kind of a diamond, right, that we started with against Honduras. The Leggett role could be Jermaine Jones. Right? Jermaine Jones could still be a guy that you bring on for the last 30 minutes if you're looking to inject some aggression into a game. I'm a really big believer in this thing that just because you don't just get rid of someone, you sort of keep them around. I was a big believer in this with Rooney for England, right? They still have a role to play. They have experience you can lean on, and they have attributes they can bring to a situation.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay.
So then the question becomes, though, why are we saying it's Jermaine Jones? Why not Michael Bradley?
Because Jermaine Jones is older, because Michael Bradley is more consistent. He has a sort of a more recent, bigger body of work, far fewer injuries, right? I mean, so do you want to get to Michael Bradley here?
Sure.
Because it wasn't Michael Bradley's best game,
Nope.
right? The sort of like the good reading of angles and sort of closing down space for Honduras that he did, he was not able to do against Panama.
Right.
There were, again, a few sloppy passes. There were some, misplayed passes. And there were some times when he stepped and didn't get to the ball. Not his best game.
Right.
But again, things can be two things. Michael Bradley can have a bad game. He's still your starting number 6 next game because nobody is better.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I would also add that I think part of the reason why at the end of this game, like I have Bradley written down a lot, but I don't have anything specific really to say about him because I don't think he had a great game. I don't think he had a good game, but I also don't think that he did anything consistently poorly that really caused problems for the U.S. I think that the entire team was not particularly great on the night, and so with that comes he's not going to be able to find those through balls. He's going to have a couple like really nice direct over balls is what we call them. He's going to have a couple of those, but he's also
one to Bedoya right at the end.
Yep, but he's also going to have a lot of putting his foot on the ball, passing it back and forth between the center backs, not really being as like progressive and forward thinking as we would like in terms of getting that ball turning and going at people.
Here's the thing as well. Michael Bradley is central to this US team, right? He is literally the central midfielder. Everything goes through him. So if the US has a frustrating night, as we did against Panama, we find it hard to connect passes and break through midfield. Like in some ways that he is to blame because like if he was a superior like best player in the world player, he maybe could have broken those Panamanian lines, right? But on the other side, like if it's also the rest of the team is to blame because they're not making angles for him to pass to, but you still all your like attention is focused on Michael Bradley, then all your frustration gets directed at Michael Bradley. And I feel like this is part of the problem is you're looking for someone to blame. You think of the guy who was always in the middle of everything, and then you blame him. Yeah, right.
And I think if you want to go the opposite way and say how important is Michael Bradley to this team, I would say if you ask Panama, my guess is that they would say very important. Which is why I think we talked about this on the Quick Take Hot Take show. What did Panama do that really kind of gave them the momentum in the second half? Why were Panama so much more likely to score or look so much more likely to score? And I think we've sort of identified it because one thing we were both frustrated about is that it seemed like for a big chunk of the second half, the U.S. couldn't win 50-50 balls, couldn't win headers. And we went back and clocked it. Starts at the 52nd minute with Michael Bradley yelling at the defense to push forward, that they're not challenging enough for headers. It goes until essentially the first time a U.S. center back steps forward and wins a header after that is the 77th minute.
Yep.
For 25 minutes, it is the U.S. backing off and getting chipped. And a big part of that is because what I think Panama started to do was essentially play a 4-2-4. And they would have two guys in the middle, isolated on Bradley, and they would play it over the top. And they're bypassing that Michael Bradley shepherding role that we saw him do against Honduras. He's no longer being able to show one way and slow attacks down. They're just chipping over the top.
Yeah, because you can triangulate against those short Honduran passes.
Yeah.
If they're going to chip it over your head and just sort of invite their strikers to challenge the US centre-backs, Michael Bradley's been bypassed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think then you combine that with the fact that in the 57th minute, that's when Omar, we talked about it last night, does like the go-go gadget leg. Instead of trying to win the header, he tries to put his foot around.
Yeah.
Panama turn, and they're off to the races. And I think from then on, the U.S. defense was a little bit scared. They were a little bit worried about that pace. They were a little bit worried about making one bad play, and suddenly it's 2-1. So they were much more standoffish. They were far more inclined to drop 5 or 10 more yards and give that space. So now all of a sudden you have Michael Bradley isolated in the middle. You've got 4 attackers marked up against 4 defenders, and you've got a good amount of space in there. Panama were then very successful at just chipping that ball over the top. One of those attackers would drop back in, and suddenly he's unmarked with tons of room, and then the United States have to completely transition. Yeah, which
it's a scary few minutes, right?
Which is why I'm excited to see certain players return, and maybe we can get to that by talking about today's sponsor.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so today's show is sponsored by Futchi, makers of the engineered soccer rebounder.
And Daryl, I feel like sometimes we don't do a good enough job explaining what a rebounder is. I'm just kidding. Daryl just said that before we started recording. Daryl, can you explain what a rebounder is and what the Futchi rebounder looks like?
Yes, okay. So imagine a black net, pretty taut, right? It's pretty tight.
Ideally, if you've installed it right. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough game.
Otherwise, you've got to do it again. Yeah. Red trim around the outside, and it is sort of leaned backwards at roughly a 45-degree angle, maybe a little higher, so that you can play the ball against it and it bounces back to you. Sounds easy, right?
Sounds easy. Not easy.
Not as easy as you'd think, because you have an opponent who's trying to do the same thing and prevent you from playing the ball against the net and landing it back at you. And you're playing at a high pace. You've got to land it in the court.
Okay.
It is a challenging 1v1 situation.
For a minute there, you were very accurately describing the results of last night's game, because it was like you've got an opponent who's doing the same thing. They're trying to hit the back of the net. Your goal is to not let them. But then you mentioned that it's high pressure, high intensity. That really wasn't last night. So maybe not so much anymore.
So, Taylor, our Futchi feature is a bounce back player.
Right.
So, because you get a bounce back off the rebounder, obviously. Who is your bounce back player for the US men's national team?
So I think we're going to take it a different route than we do usually, because it's tough to say who bounced back from a 6-0 win. So I think we're going to look at this more as, based on this game, who are we excited to see bounce back in the next World Qualifiers in whatever form that might take? And for me, it's John Brooks.
John Brooks, okay.
Yes, it's very, and I think we'll get to him when we talk about that Panamanian goal.
Yeah.
But I think the United States missed his organizational skills. I think you could see at times that the center back pairing of Ream and Gonzalez weren't as comfortable. I think if you have a player in there like John Brooks, like a Brooks,
who is now experienced and sort of authoritative, and we just think of him as the left-sided US defender.
So I think, so then he's a kind of lockdown defender we need. We know he can make those big plays, those big tackles if the situation arises, but also we know that he can play those really good 30 and 40-yard balls into feet.
That's the key, right? So Tim Ream did have quite a few nice left-footed, because he's the replacement, left-footed sprayed passes where he would chip it into it was almost like Michael Bradley type balls, right? Chip it into the channels. What John Brooks does, he will charge forward 4 or 5 paces, and then he will left-footed play a low ball sort of between midfielders and into the feet of Josie Altidore or Clint Dempsey. A lot of US attacks now start like that, with Brooks playing sort of firm balls into feet from defense to attack.
Yeah, and I would say that that's not even a criticism of Tim Ream or his ability. I would just say that if you have
a real hard thing to do.
You have one player, if you've been playing center back for our team for 3 years, right? And then we decide we're going to convert this outside midfielder into a center back. If I'm talking to the two of you, if I'm the coach, you, Daryl, I'm going to be like, all right, you know what you're doing, but today I want to see you do this little tiny nuanced thing. And the other guy, I'm like, don't let anybody score, okay? That's your goal. So I think it's just sort of Tim Ream coming in. He's not going to get the kind of freedom and license and the instructions that maybe John Brooks is going to get. And so you see the United States then kind of struggle to get sort of forward progression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that the whole thing we talked about with Bradley, sort of having to drop between the centre-backs and try and start the play there, I honestly think with John Brooks there instead of Tim Ream, it would just be a little different because players would start from the left foot of John Brooks.
Agreed. Yeah. So that's why I'm excited to see John Brooks bounce back, play for the U.S. in the next round of World Cup qualifiers. What about you, Dale Grove?
My Futchi bounce-back player is Bobby Wood. Good as like Altidore and Dempsey, well, good as they were in the first game, and as good as Dempsey was in the second game. I wasn't really excited about Altidore's performance against Panama. What the US, I thought, really needed was that sort of lively, energetic sort of diagonal sprints or lateral sprints that you get from Bobby Wood late in this game. Right. You didn't have Jordan Morris, who would have been sort of the other replacement. You only had Chris Wondolowski. So the US had no one who could come in and inject some energy into the front line. Yeah. So even if Bobby Wood doesn't start, I still would have loved him as like an extra option in the final 30 minutes of this game. He's a game changer in that way.
Absolutely. And I think if you look, I mean, if we were trying to do our like ideal US starting 11, if you have all of your options available, it's tough to say who starts because if you're going to go one forward, you've got 4 options. If you're going to go 2 forwards, you've still got 4 options in Altidore, Dempsey, Morris, and Wood. So it's really tough because then I think everybody gets pushed and everybody has to perform a little bit better.
Yes.
The way this game was tonight, it was always going to be Josie Altidore starting and always Clint Dempsey starting because you don't have many options. That's what Bruce Arena said after the first game about Clint Dempsey playing. It was like, we didn't have anybody else, so we got to play somebody.
But he did pretty well.
I think there was an expletive in there, but yeah.
And I'm actually, now that Dempsey is back, Dempsey is back. He scored 4 goals in the last 2 games. You really do have, if you're going to have a 2-striker situation, you're probably going to start Dempsey, it looks like, which means we have a battle between Josie Altidore and Bobby Wood to be the other starting forward. You've got to say it's Josie Altidore's right now, just based on so much experience. What is he, like second highest scorer in World Cup qualifying for the US men's national team? But I do like the idea of Josie being pushed. Like, do you remember when Klinsmann dropped him for sort of some poor performances?
Yeah, vaguely.
I can't even remember who replaced him, but it was probably like Eddie Johnson, Hercules Gomez, like maybe Alan Gordon. It was no one who was really at the same level.
Right.
Like now we've got someone who is probably at the same level as Josie Altidore.
I think some people would argue he's at a different level.
Well, there we go. Yeah, but so it's it should be a genuine contest to be the striker that goes just ahead of Clint Dempsey. And what I want to see is maybe that bring the best out of Josie Altidore or Bobby Wood.
Yes.
Because Josie today, Josie last night, we did see him doing the kind of statuesque standing next to a defender kind of thing, not making those sideways runs, not getting in the channels like I would like to see him do.
So I'd say I agree with you. So we're both excited to see Bobby Wood and John Brooks bounce back for the U.S. national team. And we're both excited to, now that the weather's nice, I think maybe get out there and play a little more Futchi.
Oh, yeah.
It's not so much fun when it's freezing cold, although some people who've emailed in with footage of them playing in the snow would say otherwise. Yes. But I'm excited to play. And if our listeners or other folks are excited to play as well, they can do so by getting a Futchi, and they can do so with a discounted rate.
Yep. If you use the TSS discount code TSS2017, the letters TSS, the number 2017, at checkout, you will get the biggest discount it is possible to get on a Futchi. The good thing is you don't even need a co-host to play against. You can also play on your own and just essentially work on your touch because it will bounce that ball straight back to you.
Did you mean to say co-host there? You don't need a co-host to play?
I was being very specific.
What if that were the Futchi rule? Like one of Daryl or Taylor has to be playing against you, otherwise you can only play by yourself. I think we'd be very busy. I don't know if I can commit to that kind of contract.
So the link to get a look at a Futchi rebounder is in the show notes. The discount code will also be there, but a reminder, it is TSS 2017. Thank you to Futchi for being a long-time sponsor of the Total Soccer Show.
Thank you to Futchi. Thank you in advance to John Brooks for coming back, organizing our defense, and making sure that we don't get scored on a throw-in.
Okay, Taylor, shall we talk about Panama's equaliser?
I think we have to.
Okay, it's not long after the US scores, right? There was short-lived joy of the US leading 1-0 when Panama score from a Machado throw-in is sort of just nudged downwards by Tim Ream, and then he's finished by Gomez.
Right.
1-1. And then Michael Bradley waves his arms like, what was going on there? Taylor, what was going on there?
Well, I think one thing we wanted to try to figure out from last night to today is see if there was any indicator that the United States had really prepared for a long throw or knew that was coming. Now, they may have, but a lot of times, frustratingly for us, I understand why they have to do it, but a lot of times the production team would cut away to shots of a player getting ready to take a throw in or the coach standing there silently. So we couldn't really see what the U.S. was doing, but I would say they did not look as though they had done any sort of preparation to deal with that long throw and the threat that it kind of is. Instead, it was a little bit more, hey, all the Panamanian guys continue to walk forward, and you can't be offside on a throw-in, so I guess we better move with them. And then this long throw came in.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think they knew it was coming, not least because there were a couple of earlier long throws from Machado, right? The right back.
Wait, so you think they did know it was coming?
I think they knew the long throw was coming, but I don't think they did anything specific to prepare for it, except we're going to win this header and clear it.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying no specific plans were laid out to defend it.
But are you talking about specifically the long throw for the goal, or are you talking about long throw in general? Because I would say yes. I mean, by the time that goal happens, they've had a couple long throws. But I'm saying I don't know if the United States had done any actual specific preparation for here's how to deal with a long throw.
Oh, before the game, I still don't know.
Yeah.
All I can say is I still don't know. But the end result is when Machado takes that throw late in the first half, the US hasn't done anything special. Like, they haven't got someone going to stand in his face, which is one thing you can do.
I mean,
with a long throw.
That's the obvious way to do it, because you stop their momentum. You kind of you at least make them think about, oh shoot, if I follow through, I might run into this guy. Yep. And at the very least, there's a guy standing here.
Yeah. And you just put them off in some way. That's probably the best thing you can do.
And I think the fact that there wasn't anybody doing that, the fact that you didn't have anybody really trying to aggressively win that header, and I think the fact that the very first time that long throw occurs, it happens. I think it's thrown over the back four, and all of a sudden Panama are in, and they have to get back and kind of shut down that run.
Yes.
To me, again, that points to like, oh, right, they can do that.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, the very first time. Yeah, it wasn't into the box, it was down the line. And it was long down the line, and I think Villafana is scrambling. So I think it caught the US by surprise. It seems maybe they didn't know.
Yes.
I would love to find out if anybody can get any news about this. Can we find out, did the US get warned about Machado, number 13's long throws?
Yes. I mean, that would be... That would be interesting because I think he is also a Houston player. So maybe it'd be interesting to see if DeMarcus Beasley had tipped anybody off or not. So you have that long throw come in. You don't have U.S. players attacking it. And it was actually kind of a recurring theme throughout that game that Torres got his head to one. Obviously, this goal comes from a long throw. The first long throw the U.S. kind of struggled to deal with. And it seems like there wasn't really much in the way of here's what we're going to do, here's how we're going to shut that down. It felt much more like everybody try to win that header and don't let Panama get it. Yeah. And so you had a situation in which it felt like the U.S. players were more preoccupied with, I need to make sure my mark doesn't get their head on that ball. And with that long throw, the way it's going to come in, the trajectory it's going to take, just marking your guy isn't necessarily going to do anything, because as we see, it can lead to two people challenging for one ball and ending up in a goal. Okay, and
here's the series of dominoes that happens as the ball comes in from Machado. Jermaine Jones pushes Gomez. The ball's going over Gomez, over Jones, but he gives him a little push. And normally you push that guy so that you can then get rid of him and you win the header. But instead, Jones just gives him a little push. That push goes into Villafana. So now Villafana's slightly off balance, right? Michael Bradley is with... who's it? Is it Tejada who actually... No, Torres. Sorry, Michael Bradley is with Torres, doesn't jump with him because Tim Ream is coming in from the side, and I think Tim Ream shouts Tim's ball because Bradley freezes, right? And that's what you do. If your teammate says, I'm winning this header, you don't get in their way.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's just that he doesn't back himself or if it's that he just assumes if you've got a center back hurtling towards you that they maybe are going to be the one to win that ball. But either way, he definitely doesn't go up the way you would expect him to if he's really challenging for that ball. He kind of ducks down a little bit, and I think just assumes that Tim Ream is going to be the one to get rid of it.
But do you think maybe Tim Ream has said, Tim's ball?
Oh, I think he absolutely calls for it.
Bellowing voice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you can see Bradley kind of duck out of it, is because he assumes Ream is coming through and winning that ball.
And Ream doesn't come... Well, actually, Ream does win this ball, but not in the way Ream imagines.
Yeah, I mean, no one does. Because I also think Tim Ream misjudges it because of that, because it's a throw and not a cross.
We talked about this on the instant take. It's maybe worth saying again. When you cross the ball with your foot, it has maybe a bend on it, like an in-swing or an out-swing, and defenders are used to reading that and judging that, right? The way that Machado throws this ball in has a weird... straight backspin, which is not how anyone can cross a ball except maybe Neymar.
Yeah, Neymar, that's the one. Yep.
But defenders are not used to dealing with this type of, this angle and this, what's the word, trajectory of the ball, And
that's why I think he thinks it's a usual, he being Ream, thinks it's just a usual cross, I'm going to get to it and head it clear. And that's why not only does Torres not get ahead to it, not only does Bradley not get ahead to it, but Ream doesn't either. It ends up hitting, I think, his chest, kind of stomach, and rolls down and goes off of his leg. So I think it's just a completely confusing situation for both for Ream and the overall defense. And maybe just not for Gomez, because he's able to react to it very quickly.
Because if you remember, at the very start of this explanation, Jermaine Jones has pushed Gomez into Villafana. Villafana is then slightly stumbling for a second, but Gomez has had time to recover, so that by the time this ball just bounces loose, Gomez has the step on Villafana. Villafana does everything he can to get there as quickly as he can. He even lunges out to try and get a tackle in. Gomez is just there first and smashes it past Tim Howard and makes it 1-1.
Yes, and that's very upsetting because it did seem like the United States was going to go into that half 1-0 up. Then they can make the adjustments they need to and maybe end up with 3 points or maybe a couple more goals. Who knows? But I will say the silver lining here is that I did feel like Jorge Villafana kind of continuously showed why you want a fullback to play fullback. That he did a very good job of, even in that situation, he is off balance and he's able to correct and almost get a foot to block it. Yeah. And routinely, he tracks his runs. He doesn't get lost. He doesn't start ball watching, and all of a sudden his man is 20 yards downfield. That did happen with other players. We saw Graham Zusi a couple times get caught out of position or fail to track and end up running over a player or misjudging a header, and that leading to a Panamanian attack. So this is a thing on second viewing. Zusi's performance, I think, is an interesting thing. Yeah. First viewing, I actually thought he did quite well. And in my head, I was like, oh yeah, he got forward a lot. And when he was like one-on-one defending, he usually came out with the ball. Yeah. Second viewing, he got a lot of his positional stuff wrong, right? Like we talked about, the only time the US managed to open space is when Zusi stayed back. He actually got too far forward early on and made it hard for the US to play at the back. And like you said, he was too often he let sort of people run in behind him. Even the throw-in for the Panama goal, I think 2 plays before that, the whole Panama pressure starts with Graham Zusi getting fooled by Quintero, right? Who fakes like he's going to check to the ball, then going in behind him, and Zusi has to foul him. Then it's a corner. That's a whole sequence of events. Starts with Zusi positioning himself incorrectly because he's not a defender. Jeff Cameron was injured, it turns out. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He's another one on the injury list.
And I don't know if that was known before the game, but that injury happened before the Honduras game, it sounds. Which is why, I guess,
he came out early.
Yeah, they took him about 55th or 60th minute thereabout. And that's why you had them then starting Graham Zusi last night as opposed to Jeff Cameron, which I think I was frustrated by at the time because it seems like Cameron is going to be the one to win those headers, keep position, do the kind of job that Villafana did, but you understand why, if you're Bruce Arena, you don't want somebody with, I think, a strained quad to be trying to go 90 minutes and 85 degrees. And
you would have had Orozco. Orozco had, I think, a knee injury, so he wasn't there. So Graham Zusi really was kind of filling in here.
Yeah, I think Phil Shane called him the 7th choice right back. I'm not sure that's accurate.
All right,
but
let's do this. Yedlin, Chandler, Lehigh.
Yep, maybe.
Cameron.
Yep.
Orozco. That's 5.
Yeah. And I think you might be generous there saying, like, I think if past is precedent, I'm guessing Zusi starts over Lehigh. And maybe Orozco, given that that's been the way things have been lately.
Fabian Johnson, maybe?
I think that would be the other one that he was considering as a right back. Yeah. But, I mean, that does point to the injury situation once again.
Okay, this is the other part of this game, right? Is that the US went to Panama and got a point with many, many players missing. No Bobby Wood, no Jordan Morris, no Fabian Johnson, no John Brooks, no Jeff Cameron.
Right.
That's a lot of players. No Yedlin, no Chandler. Oh, I know Chandler actually was available at this point, right? But no Yedlin. That's a lot of potential starters missing. So once again, if you're looking for reasons to feel a bit better about the United States, maybe think that we went and got 4 points out of 6 available with a very weakened roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even controversial to say that the United States was essentially only playing maybe one of their actual starters in defense, and that would be Jorge Villafana. We don't even know if he is the starting left back. But I mean, it's probably, if you have your ideal 11, if you're going to go Villafana, you would probably go, Brooks, Cameron, and then Yedlin.
Probably.
So you don't have 3 of your 4 defenders there, and you've even lost Brooks between Honduras and Panama. So of course it's going to make you look a little bit more vulnerable if you don't have players that are kind of very familiar with playing together.
Okay, so all that said, were there any problems you saw against Panama that are worries about the Bruce Arena 2017 US men's national team going forward into the games in June against, say, Trinidad and Mexico when we get back into World Cup qualifying?
I think really just that this was the first time, and maybe it's happened like other times and I just don't remember, but this is the first time I really remember worrying about that Bradley and Jones partnership and the idea of the 2 of them in the middle. I don't know if that works, and I especially don't know if that works against a team that's playing more than 2 midfielders. As we said, Panama was playing a 4-4-2. Like, it's not, I mean, yes, they sent some people into the middle, so too did the United States.
Actually, didn't we both do the same thing? We had Pulisic right winger drifting inside, and they had Cooper right wing drifting inside. Just mirror images.
So I think that would give me a little bit of concern if it just is like, if we hear him say like it's definitely going to be Jones and Bradley for the foreseeable future, that would make me be a little bit nervous.
Okay, that's right. That's the only thing. Because if so, then maybe it's not such a big worry. Because if you can replace Ream and Gonzalez with Brooks and Cameron, suddenly it's feeling good.
Well, I mean, again, as we said at the very beginning of the show, we don't want to take like a bad game and make that like, oh, and then if this happens or if this happens or if this happens, because it's a lot of ifs in there. I would just say that like that was a systemic problem or a problem of the tactics that I would be worried about going forward. I think maybe the United States will learn their lesson or they will try different things against a bunkered team in the future based on what happened tonight. I also think that Bruce Arena was okay with that point, more so than maybe I thought he was. I think he was okay with the point.
Was that disappointing?
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's my opinion at least. Yeah, I would have liked to see the United States try to go for it a little bit more, and maybe it was just sort of in that second half. It did feel like momentum was very much Panama's. It felt like the United States was kind of reeling. Even when Panama had stopped playing that long ball and the United States had started winning a few, it still felt like they always had a man open. And the United States was kind of always scrambling to try to block stuff off. It didn't feel like as much of a controlled performance as we might have expected. There
was that breakaway right at the end as well. Tim Ream had to really come up big one-on-one. I think it was Torres. I'm not sure if it was Arroyo Torres. He had to really come up big to sort of get a foot in, stop that breakaway.
Yeah,
sort of
92nd minute. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, no, there's nothing that makes me, like, super scared for the future, but it's definitely not as, like, yes, this is awesome as I was after a 6-0 win.
And, I guess the bigger emotional thing is after the 6-0 win, everybody was suddenly like, oh, the US we're world beaters again. Everything's going to be great. And this was almost like a crash back to reality that you're lucky to get out of Panama with a point. That's how it's been for 15 years now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? We're just back where we were. We're not suddenly magnificent.
Yeah, and we had plenty of people point that out, that with your remaining games that you have, win your home games, draw on the road, you're going to qualify. I think that means they have 4 points now. With the games remaining, that makes 16 points. I think, was that McG, I think, on Twitter? I think it could be John McGuire who was tweeting that. If it wasn't, I apologize to whomever it was. But that gives us 16 points. That's going to be enough to qualify. Okay. So with that in mind, it's not as exciting as I would have liked. It's not the result I probably was hoping for at kickoff, but it's in a better position, certainly, than we were a couple weeks ago.
All right. Okay, final couple of things I want to just mention. Two of the late subs that came on. Kellen Acosta, who we're very excited about. Paul Arriola, very excited about. It was good to see them in a big qualifying game. It was good because, for me, it's good because Bruce Arenas, we think of him as this guy who trusts the old guard. At least he did throw two relative inexperienced youngsters into an away Hex game with 20 minutes to go.
And he mentioned them in the post-match comments from what I saw, that he said he was impressed by the youngsters who came on as well as Bedoya. I'm not sure he phrased it like that, but he basically said he was impressed by the three substitutes. Yeah. I'd say of the three, I found Paul Arriola to be the most impressive.
It felt like an injection of energy down the road.
It did.
Which is kind of what we need. It's kind of what I wanted from Bobby Wood as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it was also that he did a really good job. I forget what minute it was, but it was definitely late in the game. He did a really nice job of tracking his mark all the way back. Because it was, I think, a run from midfield that it would have been very easy for him coming into the game, being amped up, trying to create something. It would have been easy for him to kind of sit there and be like, oh, he's not going to do anything. And suddenly that guy's unmarked down the left side. He sticks with him the whole way, completely blocks it off. Good defensive work there. But then
very Pulisic-y.
Yeah, exactly. But then does really well to get forward. He gets a long ball in from Michael Bradley that he settles very well. His delivery, not so much, but it was a kind of defensive and offensive performance from Paul Arriola that gave me confidence in him going forward.
And how about Darlington Nagbe? We now have two almost 90-minute games. He played maybe 60-70 in this game, of Nagbe at sort of left midfield or, left of that 4-1-3-2, left wing, I guess. Fabian Johnson coming back next time. Has Nagbe done enough in these two games to make it a really serious contest between Johnson and Nagbe, or does Johnson, if fit, just step back into?
If Johnson's going to play midfield, it's going to be Johnson. The question I would have is, does that mean that one of them can go play on the right? Because say if we were going to go with an attacking formation and with everybody fit, I would say right now, why not? Tim Howard, Villafana, Brooks, Cameron, Yedlin. I'd say Bradley in front if we would go with a 4-1-3-2, which is what a lot of people said the United States was doing in this game. Then if you have Johnson on the left, maybe Pulisic central, that leaves...
This is like a Honduras-looking formation.
Yeah, then that leaves space on that right. Now, it could be Pulisic on the right and Kleshtin in the middle or Feilhaber in the middle, but if you put Pulisic in the middle, which I think we would both prefer, then it could be Bedoya, could be Nagbe, could be Arriola, who knows? Could be Bobby Wood, hopefully not.
Can I offer a controversial opinion? I don't care where Christian Pulisic plays.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I'd be happy with him in the middle. I'd be happy with him on the right. I think he offers sort of an equally good threat either way. And maybe it just depends on what the opposition are doing.
Yeah.
Like if they've got a horrible left back, let's have Christian Pulisic run at them.
Yep. Because it also does
let's
allow
have
you.
Jones. They don't have a horrible left back.
Yeah. But it also does allow you, if you put Pulisic on the right, you put Fabian Johnson on the left, you put Clint Dempsey in the middle, that allows you to play Bobby Wood and Josie Altidore.
Ooh.
Now you've got some attack.
Yeah, now you've got some. Okay,
Yep.
maybe that's the future.
Yep.
Maybe that's the future. Speaking of the future, should we take a look at the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network?
We shall. Final point. We did this on the show last
Yeah.
night. I want to mention it tonight. Thank goodness, once again, as always, for Timmy Howard. Some very big saves in the second half. It really easily could have been a loss if Timmy Howard weren't there.
Yep.
He had maybe one he didn't really know that much about when he comes off his line, but the point is he comes off his line, it goes between his legs, but it stays between his legs because he has good positioning.
And especially, this is in that spell where you were saying the US sort of got scared and stopped winning headers, essentially, and Panama suddenly were able to get lots of flick-ons and through balls, and Tim Howard came up big in that 20 minutes.
Yep.
He's one of the reasons we have a point.
Yep. What was he, the Secretary of Homeland Security?
Secretary of Defense.
Secretary of Defense, of course. Either one works. Maybe he could do
But
both.
only if we go to war with Belgium, which,
Yeah, it's a good point. Anyway, with that said, thank you, Tim Howard. Let's move to the Scouting Network. Up first, we've got a report from Jonas Benson, scouting Will Vint, 15-year-old American midfielder. It's a little bit confusing here.
Okay.
According to The Sun, the American teenager is either about to or already has agreed to join Manchester United.
Wow, okay.
Now, since then, I've seen a lot of other outlets reporting similar stories of they're near a deal, Manchester United are very interested, blah, 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 blah. Jonas says his dad is an academy director at Everton, so that's a bit of a snub from Vint, who has apparently added the description footballer from Manchester United to his Instagram page.
I mean, that's as good as signing a contract.
Yeah, I think
That's
so.
a fish. Unless he's 15 and he's
That's the thing,
not
right?
great at decision making.
Yeah. Or he's like, I'm definitely going to make it. I'm going to be the next best player in the world. And then Manchester United were like, no, we were never that interested. Sorry, bud.
He's bought a Lamborghini. Up next, Daniel Jones is scouting Cody Cropper, the 24-year-old American goalkeeper for New England. Daniel says, Cropper has given up his fair share of goals this season, and the Revs have only one win so far against a Minnesota United side that will be lucky to win a game. Daniel's words, not Daryl's.
Yep.
It isn't all Cody Cropper's fault, though. There's been some porous/abject defending from his back line that has led to a number of bad situations for the American goalkeeper. Cody has given up 5 goals so far this season, but he's also come up with a few big plays. Next up, Portland.
And thank you to Daniel, who broke down a lot of the individual plays, but too much detail to include here. But he does a very good job of pointing out that a lot of goals that look like they might be Cody Cropper's fault are maybe the fault of, say, a defender who just decided not to defend for a couple minutes. Up next is John Adams, scouting Shayon Harrison. I got confused for a second. I was like, no, that's the next one on the list. Shayon Harrison, the 19-year-old English forward for Yeovil Town on loan from Tottenham. John says, good news, everyone, which is to say that he includes a gif of the professor from Futurama saying good news, everyone. Harrison scored the first goal of his loan spell with Yeovil Town.
Hey, finally!
Yeah, well, wait for it. Oh. He started the Glovers' away match against Exeter City and scored in the 70th minute, making it 3-0. He was subbed out in the 77th, which might end up being a good thing since Exeter proceeded to score in the 88th, 90th, and 92nd minutes.
I'd watch highlights of this game.
Finished 3-3. Well, you can because John Adams included them in that email.
3-0 to 3-3 in, 4 minutes by the look of it? Wow.
And I can't help but notice that John left out some of the details about Shayon's first goal because it's a shot from distance from somebody else that is like saved and spilled, and he heads into the goal off of the rebound. But even when he heads it, it's sort of like not a direct header the way it's kind of like a softly hit looping header that bounces and goes into the goal.
I have 3 words for you, Taylor.
Yeah?
They all count.
There we are.
Up next, Todd Ito is scouting Shunta Nakamura, the 17-year-old Japanese striker. Todd says in late March, Nakamura moved from Kashiwa Reysol under-18s to Aomori Yamanda High School. Todd did some research about what this means. I was wondering the same thing. And here's what he found. There are currently 2 youth development systems for under-18 football in Japan. U18 club youth, such as U18 teams that J-League Club owns, e.g. Kashiwa Reysol under-18s, which is where Nakamura was, and, quote, high school teams, e.g. Aomori Yamanda High School, which is where he now is. Since the formation of the J-League, there's been a growing trend for great youth players to be recruited by U18 J-League teams first, and then players who could not be recruited by U18 clubs will go to, quote, quote, high schools. However, it also looks like J-League U18 teams regularly play high school teams, so Todd isn't certain what to make of the transfer just yet. I hadn't read this before recording. I was assuming it would have some resolution.
Yeah, it doesn't really, other than that he didn't get signed by one, and he was like let go, I guess, by one of those club teams to go to the high school team. But then that high school team, I think when they played a club team, he scored a brace, so it might not necessarily be that much of a step down. That's why I think Todd is going to continue to monitor the situation.
So I assigned Shunta Nakamura to Todd because he's apparently he was the up-and-coming teenage soccer player in Japan. So that's why I was really surprised that he got let go by any youth team.
Well, we'll see what happens because I guess the high school competition is fairly stiff over there. Final report comes from Gillian Avalon, scouting Ronan Hale, the 18-year-old Irish forward for Birmingham City. Baby Ronan, as she calls him, has been playing for Ireland's U19s and scored a penalty in a 2-0 victory over Italy. They then lost 3-0 to Sweden and then beat Belgium 1-0, but Ronan wasn't able to get on the score sheet in either game. Gillian adds that baby Jack, that would be Jack Storer, her other scoutee for Birmingham City, remains very, very in love with his girlfriend. That's according to his Twitter profile. And she adds that she's pleased with Jonathan Spector, and a former Blues player, and his performances for Orlando City this season.
Okay. Thank you to Jonas, to Daniel, to John, to Todd, and to Gillian. If you would like to support the Total Soccer Show, join the Total Soccer Show Scouting Network and be assigned a young player to scout. You can go to totalsoccershow.com/subscribe, and all the information is there right in front of you on your computer screen and or mobile phone.
These are facts.
Until Thursday's show, Taylor, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again very soon.